Hi everyone, welcome to Nautilus TV. I'm Deborah McPherson, web editor at Nautilus International. Joining us this time is Tim Slingsby, chair of the Maritime Charities Group. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Hello.
Tim, Maritime Charities Group fosters collaboration across the maritime sector, and some of that work includes important seafarer research, which Nautilus International also takes part in. And this latest research, published in the Seafarers 2040 report, has some quite stark findings, doesn't it? Can you tell us a bit more detail about the findings and how it relates to the demographics and the size of our UK seafarer population?
The big headline from our report is that we found that those essential contributions which our seafaring communities make to the UK are now under threat. Let's talk about what we mean by the seafaring community. We've defined it in the report as working seafarers, retired and former seafarers, and their dependents. And the research, which is based on analysis of existing large data sets, warns that this community, which currently stands at more than 500,000 people, could nearly halve by 2040. So we could get seafarer community numbers down to about 300,000, and in an extreme scenario, according to the projections, this figure could get to be as low as 131,000, which is a 75% decrease in that community. Now, we talk about the community because the community itself is really important, as it is in all industry communities. They make vital contributions to their areas, from cultural traditions being kept alive to sharing their skills and their knowledge, and importantly, for all of us interested in the education and welfare of seafarers, attracting the next generation. So it's that that's really at risk. Of course, we also need to talk about active workers because that group is key. And seafarers are the active workers within this group. And we see within the report that the population of active seafarers is also expected to decrease by 2040. Now, that's only about 6%, which is from 35,000 approximately today to about 33,000. But in an extreme scenario, that could drop as low as 23,000. So what we're seeing is a lot of indications of issues in areas such as future recruitment of seafarers, preserving knowledge, lived experiences in coastal communities, and all of these things which make vital contributions to the UK as a maritime nation. And we can talk about some of the specifics that we see within active seafarers as well that we're already aware of course. So one of the let's talk about three of the big safety worries that we see in the report. 2 in 5 seafarers believe that their vessels are unsafe due to a lack of crew. 40% of seafarers feel they don't get enough sleep on board, and only 1 in 3 seafarers think that they receive adequate shore leave. So these all speak to a series of indications of problems that now we need to do something about.
Right. Gosh, it does mirror a lot of research that we've seen over the last couple of years as well. So it's really interesting to get that overview. And why did MCG commission this research in the first place?
Well, that's a good question. Well, the Maritime Charities Group is an alliance of some of the largest maritime charities in the UK, and we're here to foster collaboration across the maritime charity sector. We do that by commissioning research and by promotion of effective practice within the sector. But the golden thread that runs through everything that we do is the education and welfare of seafarers and their families. In addition to all that, it's quite some time since we last did one of these reports. I think the research was first done in 2007, then updated in 2015. And whilst that's already 10 years ago, the world's undergone some pretty major challenges since 2015, not least of which was the pandemic. So it's really important to bring our understanding of the current and projected demographics of the UK seafarers up to date. And through that, understanding the perspective of those seafarers and their families, and understanding, and that would also enable us to better understand their perspective of the services provided by the maritime charity sector. And so we get an up-to-date picture that will improve the maritime welfare charity services up to 2040. And so we're all in a much better place to serve the education and welfare of seafarers and their families.
Right. Oh, thank you. And what is meant by this term vanishing seafarer communities?
But the term vanishing seafarer communities, which is where we really are calling out the 40% predicted reduction in UK seafaring communities, is defined as working seafarers, retired and former seafarers, and their dependent children. So vanishing seafarer communities does sound very depressing, but it's also a wake-up call. I say in the foreword to the report that the importance of seafarers to our maritime nation, to the UK, can't be overstated. And I think I'm not unique in saying that never before have we been so reliant on the ocean economy and so ignorant of its importance. I'm constantly surprised at how few people understand that 90% of the goods we trade are moved via the sea. Seafarers are not only responsible for that, but also crew the naval vessels that protect national and global interests. And seafarers sustain coastal communities because they have such a link with food production, tourism, and leisure, and increasingly things like offshore energy production and supply as well. And of course, we're all aware of the excitement and rewarding nature of working at sea, but we also know it's difficult and dangerous as well, and harm harm at work being reported at this sector occurs. That reporting occurs more in this sector than any other. And whilst we're in the middle of great change and challenge as well, I spoke a moment ago about increasing importance of seafarers to energy production and supply. That's part of the increased uncertainty that comes from the rapid emergence of new technologies, transition to new fuels, whilst we're also dealing with the increased risk from climate change. So it was a real deliberate choice to use the phrase vanishing communities because we want to highlight how important the seafaring community is. And if we lose them, we lose an awful lot of things that are linked to them and are linked to the vitality and sustainability of our nation as a whole. Um, and you can appreciate, I'm sure, that trying to define what we mean by seafarer in the face of all this uncertainty and new types of jobs at sea was not simple. But what we decided to do was focus only on civilian seafarers across the merchant navy and fishing fleets of the UK and workers on board commercial vessels. So workers on board commercial vessels includes workers in the merchant navy accounted for by the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency and by the UK Chamber of Shipping. And while we can see that there are licensed workers of small vessels and super yachts that are accounted for by the MCA, not all workers of small vessels and super yachts are included in the projections because lots of that data is missing from official reports. We can actually tease out some of the differences between, for example, fishers and merchant navy seafarers. The appendices to this report are a rich data set and they can be found online on the Maritime Charities Group website. But for example, as an example of that teasing out, we show that within the data, fishers in Northern Ireland, fishers working part-time, ratings in the Merchant Navy, and seafarers in the Merchant Navy in the 40 to 44 age group are expected to stay reasonably constant between now and 2040. So, this picture of decline is not constant across every single part of what we're calling our seafaring community.
Right. Okay. And does the report point to any causes for the perceived potential reduction in seafaring communities?
Um, the report doesn't really look at causes. It was specifically looking at the what rather than the why. But of course, we don't have to look too far for research that offers some pretty good suggestions. You know, the work of Helen Sampson and her team at Cardiff University is a rich source of insight over many years, and there are lots of other examples as well. Um, some of the issues that we see raised within the report, raised by the research that led to the report, are societal industry level issues. So maritime welfare charities and the MCG can't necessarily address them. That might be things like access to social care, childcare, dental care. But I referred to Helen Sampson a moment ago. She and her colleagues had a report out earlier this year in which she said something that resonates with me. She emphasized that outdated policies and practices have the opportunity to persist in the shipping industry where they may be taken for granted by all stakeholders, including seafarers, to a degree that allows them to fall out of line with contemporary shore-based and corporate and social norms and values. So there's a cultural thing within seafaring that suggests that we need to address in order to improve the welfare of seafarers and make their um, careers at sea that bit more attractive.
Yes, that's right. And of course, the union has also been campaigning for improving barriers to careers in terms of training and increasing the gender balance, smart funding, sea blindness in general. As you say, there's a plethora of different things. But so, what are the implications for maritime charities, such as the Nautilus Welfare Fund,
Mm,
in terms of
mm.
providing current and future services for the retired seafarer communities?
So the implication for maritime charities such as the Nautilus Welfare Fund is pretty clear actually. If the demographic profile of the population that these charities aims to support is changing, then maritime charities need to respond to that change. So, most importantly, we found that many seafarers, and notably, double underlining notably, their families are actually unaware of the support that's available to them from the UK's maritime welfare charity sector. I'd like to emphasize that when we did this report, our findings are based not just on raw data and the large, rich data sets I referred to earlier, but also on conversations and interviews with seafarers, retired seafarers and their families, and with maritime welfare charities as well. Absolutely everybody agrees that maritime welfare charities need to be more visible. So we should shout about it. We should be very, very clear about the services that the charities provide. We should get the communication about those charities, the communication about those services clear from the very beginning, and where possible, collaborate. I think, and this is a personal perspective, if the population of those that we're trying to serve is actually decreasing, as the report suggests, then the very worst thing that can happen is that charities start competing over reaching individuals and their families. And instead, they should be collaborating, working together, partnering to make sure the services that we provide to seafarers are as effective, as rich, and as useful as possible.
If we talk about some of maybe the finer detail of the proposed or the recommendations, what are the beneficiary eligibility criteria changes referred to that might be needed for seafarers coming up to retirement, for example?
One of the things that we recommend within the report is that charities should consider how their eligibility criteria for their services might evolve. Um, it's absolutely not for me to say how different independent charities with their own proud histories and successes should change. But what the report does make clear is that the demographics of the UK seafaring community is changing, and how charities respond to those changes and alter their eligibility to criteria to be able to respond to evolving needs is absolutely up to them. We're just making clear that we think there is a need for people to respond to the changing demographics. And of course, the Maritime Charities Group whilst it can't say to anybody else, do this, do that, we are absolutely committed to supporting charities to adapt to potential significant changes in needs of the future seafaring community. So in the first instance, we're thinking of a program of activities that could include hosting a series of webinars and workshops that cover the sorts of things that this report starts to highlight. What is the seafarer of the future look like? How can charities, particularly smaller charities, be more effectively supported in their financial planning and use of reserves? And how can governance of charities evolve in order to change eligibility criteria, which might include a need to change charitable objects or their constitution, for example, but could certainly involve, as you were saying earlier, some potential changes to the funding criteria of various welfare services. So there's lots we can do to support, but absolutely not going to say you must do this or you must do that.
So, what are the implications for our target audience, the merchant Navy seafarers and those considering a career at sea, do you think, from this report?
Well, actually, I hope that seafarers and those considering careers at sea actually take positives from the report, because what the report says almost as its first thing is that seafarers are vitally important to our maritime nation. I was saying a few moments ago that 90% of the goods we trade are moved via the sea. Seafarers crew all the naval vessels that protect national and global interests. They sustain coastal communities, do their contributions to food production and tourism and leisure activities and so on and so forth. So, first of all, seafaring is vital and important. Also, I hope that they see through the report that there's a maritime charity sector that is not only already invested in the welfare of seafarers and their families, but is also, through this report and the recommendations that this report provides, committed to respond to evolving needs and ensure that the services the charities provide remain relevant to the welfare of seafarers from the very beginning of their exciting careers at sea, long into their retirement.
What do you think the next steps are now for maritime charities and the union and other bodies they collaborate with in terms of shared interest campaigns and collecting further data?
Yeah, there's a lot that we can do, I think. And the first open goal, if you will, is that um, we should be driving the profile and visibility of the support available from the maritime welfare charity sector. And I think there's an obligation on the largest and leading organizations to drive that profile and drive that visibility. And that's some of the support that the larger organizations can provide for the smaller organizations. One of the things we can also do is, as the report highlights that a lot of data is missing or fragmented, we should be promoting the need for systemic collection of population level data on seafarers, former seafarers, seafarer families, including those working on yachts and smaller vessels and those that are going to be service vessels to new and growing industries, whether that's new forms of agriculture like seaweed cultivation or new forms of energy like offshore renewables. But we also need to collect much more data in a systemic fashion on former civilian seafarers and families of those seafarers as well.
Mm.
It's one big area that will really strengthen the offer from maritime welfare charities and the way in which charities can work with the industry as well to ensure that seafarers are supported effectively in safe and decent work. Um, we also have an idea at the Maritime Charities Group for developing what we've called the Seafarers Welfare Research Network. So this is idea at the moment, but we'd love to collaborate with others on supporting the collection, sharing, and use of best available data in the most effective manner. We're also committed, I think, he says with my MCJ hat on, to updating the demographic data at regular intervals, hopefully with improved data as well, so that we can start to understand whether or not specific milestones in terms of um, things like seafarers and their families being more aware and accessing services across the sector are being hit.
Okay. Oh, thank you. And finally, are there any learnings from the report on how to use our valued maritime charity and union partnerships to turn the tide on some of the findings, do you think?
I hope so. I mean, without being necessarily specific about charity and union partnerships, though I think they are a strong and important voice here. Um, there are discussions about a clear, enforceable commitment to shore leave within the Seafarers Charter framework, which of course aligns with the Maritime Labour Convention and the DFT's Maritime 2050 People Route Map. I think that's really important, especially considering what I said at the beginning about one of our clear findings being that only 1 in 3 seafarers think they get adequate shore leave. I think there's also a lot to be done for encouraging better organizational industry practices that are conducive to well-being of seafarers. Absolutely includes minimum safe crewing compliance, as I said a moment ago, ensuring sufficient shore leave and providing appropriate, adequate rest and recreation facilities and time. And then I think if we continue together to support those mechanisms for charities, industry, and governmental organisations to work together in supporting seafarers' safety and welfare, we're going to be on the right track. I think we might need to have a heavier boot on the accelerator, but we'll be on the right track.
Thanks so much, Tim, for those great insights into the report, which everyone can find on the Maritime Charities Group website, along with details that will be upcoming for a planned webinar.